this is the install of the lighter tactical 7+1 steel tube extension. You can see the finish here. The color is almost identical. I mean, like 95% to the factory Benelli. So to get to this step, take the barrel off, remove your Indian peace pipe extension that goes on the end. Take the cap off, get the barrel off, then remove this. And then once you get to this point, there's two more tricky steps. So the first one is you have to have the snap ring pliers to get this sucker off, and there is a pretty loaded spring behind it. So practice safe disassembly, safe direction, safety glasses on to get that out of there. And then we're going to need to get this retaining clip, or the piece that retains the grips, off. And we're going to have to heat this to break down the Loctite, and then be able to twist this off and put the new one in. So I got the spring out. What you're going to need to get this piece out, you need something to clamp onto those two tabs and pull them together a bit to relieve the tension. So I bought these from Warfighter Tactical. These are made in the USA. Ring pliers, and pretty good quality. They did the trick. So one thing here, again, I wasn't really sure what all I was going to need it before I started these mods. So I bought this Made in USA follower, thinking that the reason to get it over the factory piece was because the factory spring sat on top of the factory follower. I will say they have slightly different shape, and this aftermarket piece is just a little bit shorter, and it doesn't have this nub at the very top. So some people have very difficult time fitting a 7th round in the tube. So I guess this is going to be better because you might even just that little bit of an inch or fraction of an inch might help to avoid the restriction. So let's compare the factory spring to the Wolf Full Power. So the Wolf Full Power longer. They look to be about the same gauge steel, so both appear to be high quality pieces. The Wolf spring has a slightly different, looks like it has some sort of coating. You can see that coloring than the factory, which appears to be raw. So I think that's money well spent. You can see the base here. The factory Benelli has an extra coil at the end, versus the Wolf is a little bit, it's almost a single coil, but I don't know if you can really perceive that, and that doesn't really make any sort of difference. So let's move on to the next step. Okay, so next step here, I got some rags in my vise, a couple rags on each side to protect the stock. Clamp that down, not too hard, because it will leave some red rag markings on the stock. Pop out the trigger pin, just a little punch, light hammering. This pin came out, trigger's out here. And what you're going to want to do is, these are assembled with Loctite from the factory. So this takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your heat gun. You need to heat it up enough to get the Loctite to break. Set a timer for about 12 minutes. Use gloves, heat resistant gloves and rags. And once the barrel budges a little bit, it's going to be there. The Loctite will be broken, and then this will be able to come off. So we'll start that process now. So just trying to really heat the receiver where the actual threads are, versus heating the stock magazine tube. So that's going to be the trick. Just kind of work it around every so often to try to get even heating. So mine took 13 minutes. there is the Loctite. There's the end. So I just kept heating it. At about 5 minutes, it started to move a little bit. By the way, this is the Harbor Freight heat gun. It only has 2 settings. Some people use a thermometer to do this, to get to 250 degrees. You don't really need that. You can just sort of play with it while you're getting the heat. You're trying to get the heat right into here to break that down, that Loctite down. So that came out. We'll clean all this out once it cools down. This will burn you. It will burn the hell out of you. So be very careful. I have 2 sets of leather gloves, rags everywhere. I burned my workbench a little bit there, but no issue. So this is a pretty easy job so far. You can do this. It might seem daunting, but you don't even need a vise. You can get towels and sort of work this. Once it breaks, the Loctite breaks, it's pretty easy to get out. Next step here, just get a wire brush and clean out the threads from the Loctite. So next step here, once you clean that all out, is to get the new magazine tube in there. There's 2 ways to do this. You can put the spring clip in the end here, load the spring, load the follower, and put it in this way, but I'm going to do it the other way. I'm going to seat the magazine first, and then I'm going to put the spring and the cap on. I think that's slightly easier, and I mean, you'll probably be sure that it's seated properly because you can work the follower with your finger, but you know, I'll take the second route and we'll see how it is. So I'm not going to use Loctite. This is machined so beautifully, and I highly doubt if you get this snug enough that you have a scenario where Loctite would prevent your magazine tube from loosening up. So you can put Loctite. I would say that's optional, but I'm not going to do it. Some people would probably default to that because the factory came with Loctite, but we'll also see how snug this gets. So I did clean all that out. I used some just gun cleaner, got a rag, got a Q-tip, and worked that around the threads to make sure there's no Loctite left. I also did put a little layer of gun oil in there. So this is all cooled down, and that is extremely snug. I don't think that's going anywhere. So we got that seated. Next thing is put the follower. Make sure to get the follower in. If you forget that, you're gonna have to do all this over. Put your follower in, then put the spring, and then work on the cap. So one thing about this cap, the spring cap, and it was easier doing it that way, putting the spring in, holding it down with my thumb, and then getting this over it. You want this thing to be just a minor fraction of an inch less than flush. That will ensure the greatest magazine capacity. Some people had some issues with seating this too far inside, and they lost some capacity. So try to get it just a little bit less than flush.